Well, welcome to another day of life on the farmstead. I'm spending a little bit of time in the shop today. It's a little bit warmer outside, and with a little bit of supplemental heat, I got the barrel stove going, and I fired up the turkey fryer just to put a little extra heat in here until the barrel stove took off. But what I want to work on today is this generator. Now, the backstory on this is a good friend of mine called me up, last spring I think it was, and he owns a property that is really isolated, no power to it, and when he's out there he runs everything off of a generator, and the generator that he had been using went defunct on him, so he got this new generator that was PTO driven off his tractor. Problem is, he ran the tractor out of fuel and he couldn't figure out how to get the diesel tractor to run again after it had been run out. So he asked me if I'd come over and help him. And so I went over there, and it only took about 10-15 minutes. We got it running, and we sat around Jack John for a couple hours talking about this, that, and the next thing. And he kept wanting to pay me for coming out there. And it's like, man, you don't owe me nothing. You know, that's what friends do. You need a hand, I'm here. I could help you. And so while we're continuing on with our conversation and our cold beers, I come across this generator that's sitting pushed up underneath the trees, been there for about a year. Here's the generator. I'll turn it around shortly and give you a better look on it when I can see what you're seeing, but for right now, that's what I got. It's a Hobart generator, Champion, 10,000 generator running on an Onan 20 horse, and it's like, well, what's the deal with that? And he says, well, I just had it rebuilt. That's what I was using for power out here. I just had it rebuilt, and it came back, and they must have been doing something wrong with it because it only ran for about maybe 6 to 8 weeks correctly, and then it just started going downhill, and it got to the point where it wouldn't run anymore. I tried messing around with the settings, and I couldn't keep it running, so I pushed it off over there and went and bought this new generator. And it's like, well, you know, if you're not doing anything with it, if it's just going to sit there and take up space on your property, how about I trade you for my trip over here and for that old generator, and if nothing else, there's a bunch of copper in it I could scrap, there's some aluminum I could scrap, you know, a little something, right? And so I get it here, and I start messing around with it, and there's a couple of things that I found. And I'm going to switch camera around and we'll look at the generator itself. So here's the generator itself. It's a Hobart Champion 10,000, and like I said earlier, I got it for helping a friend. He wasn't using it anymore. It was just taking up space. It was pushed under trees and going to sit there until the tires rot off of it. And I'm thinking, okay, if nothing else works, I know the generator down in here has got some copper in it. I know the engine's got some aluminum on it. There's a starter, there's some fuel lines, there's some coils, there's all kinds of different stuff that we can use on the farm for something. And if nothing else, the trailer it's on is worth something, right? So I got it out here, and I get to looking at it, and it won't start. It doesn't matter if I was using starting fluid or gas in the carburetor, it wouldn't even pop. Might backfire once in a while. So I get to looking at it, and I took the valve covers off on both sides and found out that the exhaust port on this side was completely closed. There was no valve clearance whatsoever, and the intake on the other side had no valve clearance whatsoever. I'm guessing that they just didn't tighten down the set screws on the valve adjustments, and it relaxed over time, or maybe the valve gap the seats wore in a little bit. But either way, there was no compression on either cylinder. And so before I scrapped it, I decided I'd play around with it a little bit. And I adjusted the valves correctly. I looked it up. The Onan site is really good about that. They'll give you all the specs on it. And so I got the valves adjusted right, and by God, it fired up when I put some starting fluid in it. But you had to keep the starting fluid on it to keep it running. But then it never would pull anything up out of the tank. So I went through the fuel pump and found that it was clogged with all kinds of debris and crap. And so I cleaned out the diaphragms. Figured if it's going to be worth doing again, I'd have to replace them. But I cleaned everything up and thought I'd play with it a little bit. I cleaned those up and it started pumping fuel. And if I took the fuel line off the fuel pump and put it in the carburetor, in the throat valve here, or in the throat body, it would run. You couldn't control the speed or anything, but it would run. But with it hooked up correctly, it wouldn't work. So I tore the carburetor down. And couldn't find anything of any significance in there. There was a little bit of crap in it, and put it all back together, and still the same thing. Then what I found out was that this chicken shit little thing right here is a solenoid that shuts the fuel off. Both when you shut the tank on or shut the generator off, I believe to help keep it from siphoning the fuel on a gravity-fed system here, to keep it from drawn back out of the bowl, but also it's tied in with the circuits that question the oil level in the engine, so that if the oil level gets low, rather than burning it up, it shuts the fuel off and shuts the engine down, so that you're not going to burn the engine up until you figure out what the problem is, like put some oil in it, right? So I get to looking, and the solenoid is shot. It will not open, close, put power to it. It's getting power, but it won't open or close. It's totally froze up. So I order one. That's a $260 part. Now granted, I went straight to Onan, but I couldn't find it anywhere else that matched the criteria. So I just ordered the damn thing, thinking, okay, we'll try it, right? And I put that on, and it started, and it ran, and it did everything it was supposed to do. It generated electricity. I was running shop lights. I was running the air compressor. But the one thing that I noticed was that it was wound up way too tight. So I get to looking at the adjustments for the governor and the adjustments on the idle speed, and they were both cranked in so tight that it could do nothing but run wide open. So I got my tester out, and I backed off the governor until it was running at a run speed that gave me 120, and then when I switched it over to the run idle position, I got it adjusted the idle speed until it came down to a reasonable level. I currently don't have a means of gauging what the RPM actually is, but I just brought it down to something that sounded right, and it wasn't screaming, and it stayed running. And everything was working great. I put this part on it, and everything was working great. It started, it ran, it generated, it did everything it was supposed to do. And called that a night. The next day I come out, and I'm going to start putting all this back together, because I think I got it figured out, right? Dialed in. And I get it started, I get it running, let it do its thing for a little while I'm playing with it. And all of a sudden, out of the middle of nowhere, my shop lights go dim and the engine idles down, and I look up and the circuit board is sizzling. And I'm going to go over here and find the circuit board. Where did I set it? Yes, my shop's a mess. Where did I put it? Ah, there it is. Right where I thought it would be. What I found was, this is the circuit board that goes to it. And this part right here was on fire and sizzling. I'll bring that back around to the other side so you can get a better look at it from the other direction and see that this is burnt. Well, when this burnt, it's going to be hard to see in here, but there's a little computer chip sitting right in front of it, right there, that also burnt. And when those two burnt, it idled down. It stayed running, but it idled down and it quit producing any energy whatsoever. So my question is, if there's anybody out there that's smart enough to know what that portion of this massive circuit board controls, it would help me isolate where the problem came from. I'm thinking it's got to be someplace up around that fuel solenoid, but I don't currently see anything wrong up there. All the wires that I have traced so far, I've gone through every wire in this harness, and I cannot find a burnt wire, a corroded wire, a bad connection, anything. All of it looks perfect. But at the same time, it fried, and I don't want to fry another one because I bought the new circuit board. I found it. Took me 3 days on the internet and I found it. I got a brand new one, but that's 650 bucks. I don't want to replace two of them. So if anybody's smart enough to figure out what part that controlled, it would at least help me figure out what part of the engine I need to be looking at. So we'll let it go at that for now, and we'll get back to you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm still working on the generator here, and as I mentioned earlier, I have gone through once again every one of the wires in the wire harness that lead up to the circuit panels and everything, and I could find nothing wrong. I've traced it down through all the various circuits throughout the whole thing, and I could find absolutely nothing wrong. But then I'm thinking, okay, well, what was the last thing I did before it quit working? And the last thing I did was replace this solenoid, which has this one wire. And I get to looking, and okay, there's a whole bunch of other wires that come in, but they come in underneath a cover plate that I couldn't see any of because I hadn't taken that off yet. And what I found, I'll put a shop light on this and maybe you can see it. Right here in the middle of all that is a whole bunch of wires that are burnt. I think there's a really good chance that that may be where the problem lies, because the wire that I replaced is that red one there on the top, and it's right in the same vicinity as all these other ones that are burnt out. So maybe I dislodged something that made it not work anymore. So I'm gonna see what I can do about getting them wires out of there, cleaning them all up, and splicing them back together correctly, and hopefully that will solve my problem. I'm still looking for your thoughts. If you got any ideas, let me know. Okay, so from where we left off, I took these wires down up inside of here, and I got them all spliced with a solid connection, and I got shrink tube around everything from on the connections themselves and from both directions over all of the connections. My next project is to get the new board installed, which is right there, Gonna get that installed in here and hope like hell that I'm not missing something. So I'm gonna prop the phone here, and you can almost see what I'm doing. So we'll go with that. So first of all, it's still in the package. It's brand new. The new circuit board. I'm gonna find the battery. I'm gonna ground out to it. I'm gonna put my feet solid on the floor without moving. And I'm gonna take this out of the package. And I'm not moving my feet. I'm not doing anything different. I'm still in contact with the machine. I'm gonna get in here and get a hold of this package. I'm doing my best to only touch it on the sides so that I'm not shorting anything out or messing anything up. Alright, so I got a hold of it by its side, and I know that that resistor was on the top, so I'm just gonna bring it right back in here and put it back in place, trying only to touch it on the sides and get it back in place. And let's see, where are the mounting holes? Oh, one should be right there. Let's try this one. Oh, there's plastic or something over them. It doesn't want to go through the hole. Alright, so I gotta mess with that, but that one doesn't line up. That one doesn't line up. There's something wrong here. Okay, I'm gonna have to deal with this for a second, figure out where things go, and then I'll get right back with you. Okay, so once I got past the lack of light issue, everything lined up really well on the board and got it mounted back where it's supposed to be. So let's see if we can figure out where these go. That one lines up really good. We'll go here with that. This one lines up good. We'll go with that. This one lines up here. Let's go with this one because it's lower and I can see it. So that went there. And this one goes here. There we go. If I turn it over, it fit perfectly. So now everything's hooked back up exactly the way it was before I had issue. So I got the wires fixed on that end. I got everything working to the best of my knowledge exactly the way I think it ought to be. So let's see what happens. Let's pull a choke out here. Got the choke pulled out. Okay, so it started, it ran. I got it warmed up a little bit, and it's doing the idle down project like it's supposed to. If I throttle it up to run, it throttles up. I turn it down, it throttles down. Where'd that cord go? Plug in a shop light. Throttles up like it's supposed to, and the shop light comes on. I think I got it working. That's a good thing. Shut it off for a few minutes, let it sit there for a second. We'll be back in a minute. So I just realized a couple moments ago that my phone ran out of memory storage space, and I'm not sure how much of all of that anything came across on until I go back and edit videos. So I'm just going to come back from the beginning and start over. Okay, so up inside of here, I got those wires. That the only wires on the entire freaking thing that I could find that didn't look perfect, I got those spliced and isolated and insulated, and I got the new board pressed into place. I got everything hooked up, and then I decided I'd try and start it, and got a new battery in it too, by the way. So it's almost like the first time, but not exactly. So here, let's try it again. There's the run, idle. There's the run. Here's the start. Yes, I think it would have started a little bit sooner if I'd have used the choke, but the motor was already warm, so I didn't think I needed to. Now that's in full run position. Turn it down to the run idle position. It stays on and does everything it's supposed to do. Now I just unplugged the cord to the shop light with it in the run idle position. So it should idle, there we go. It just idled down. So that part is working right. And if I plug this back in, it should throttle back up and the shop light should come back on. That part's all working great. Unplug it again, leave it alone. I'm going to actually shut off the charge circuit. And it just idled back down again. I think it's working. I think it's working exactly the way it ought to be. I got a good, clean sounding engine. Everything seems to be doing just what it's supposed to be doing. Now I'm curious what you think. Okay, this is we talked about it earlier, but okay, so it's a Champion 10,000 230 amp DC welder generator. Now I haven't checked the 220 circuits yet. Messing with this doesn't seem to make a difference on the throttle because I don't have any draw on it. But I don't know. This welder on a trailer, replacing that circuit board cost me $650. Replacing this chicken shit solenoid cost me $200, and it needed a battery, which it needed to begin with anyway. So you put it all together, I'm someplace in the vicinity of $1,000 in 20 hours time. Is that worth it? Just throwing your thoughts out there. The CO2 is getting kind of heavy in here, or the CO is getting kind of heavy in here with the engine running. So I'm going to call this a night. Tomorrow I'm going to put the shrouds back on, start it a couple more times, play with it some more, but right now I think it's working. I don't think I need to mess with it anymore. Shut it off, give it a second or two. I'll try starting it one more time. We'll see where that goes. Okay, let's give it some choke this time, see if we can speed that process up a little bit. That worked perfect. I think we're gold. Tomorrow I'll put the shrouds back on it. Play with it a little bit more just to make sure. But I'm going to put the shrouds back on it and get it out of the shop and bring the next project in. So that's it for tonight. Keep your timbers shivering. We'll catch you later. Good night, everybody.